What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video. And just a few days ago, we got the last banned and restricted announcement of 2025, and there's a lot of notable changes on this list. We see Heartfire Hero banned from the Pioneer format, unfortunately a format that doesn't seem like it's ever really going to be supported in paper anymore. RIP to a real one, honestly, because I love the Pioneer format. I thought the metagame was fantastic back when we had the last Pioneer Regional Championship, and it's just unfortunate because I really have a lot of love for Pioneer. There's obviously no reason to play it in the competitive sense outside of something like on Arena, which for me is a lot harder to get the cards for. Legacy, we have Entomb and Nadu, cards that have been kind of, Nadu being a newcomer, Entomb just forever being the card that, players played in Legacy. That was just the thing. But the thing we're going to focus on heavily here is Standard, because while these bans in Standard, I think, are going to help the format in the short term, especially as we gear up for the second RCQ season for the end of 2025 into 2026, I think that this is going to offer a short-term solution to what I think is now very apparently become a long-term problem here in Standard. And there's a few different ways that I want to kind of tackle this discussion and talk about some of the changes that need to be made to the Standard format that go even deeper than just, banning some cards or maybe even unbanning cards and whatever. Because I think that there's two roads that you can kind of go down at this point. And, I'll kind of try to offer my insight the best that I can. Of course, if you want to join in the discussion and everything, be sure to pop down to the comment section and leave your thoughts on the Standard format. Do we just need to leave it alone? Are there some other changes that would need to be made? I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. And while you're scrolling down to the comments, be sure to check and see if you're subscribed to the channel. I could make up some arbitrary stat about people not being subscribed. Whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. If you've gotten any enjoyment out of my videos, or you like the discussion, or you just want to have a very loud opinion of Magic the Gathering, whatever the reason, I would appreciate it if you did subscribe to the channel, ring notification bell, all that fun stuff. It's a free, easy way to support the channel. And if you want to actually get in and explore this new Standard format that we're going to be getting, because I'll be honest, this has kind of reinvigorated me. I didn't want to play any VV Cauldron Mirrors or Cauldron versus Mono Red or vice versa type games. So with kind of this new Standard format, I'm going to look forward to exploring it. And one of the easiest ways to kind of explore it is to check out the sponsor of the channel, Manatraders. Manatraders is a monthly subscription service that you can use to rent cards for Magic the Gathering online, so you don't have to make that big investment of buying into a deck and then thinking, well, what if I don't like it, and then having to sell the cards and buy new ones, whatever the case may be. Manatraders makes it super easy, and it has near instant speed trading, so you can just go and rent cards. You say, I want to rent these cards, and then within seconds, they're going to be in your hands, in your account, ready to play in either your online league, challenge, or whatever other main competitive event that you want to try out on Magic the Gathering Online. I think this is a really useful tool. As someone that does a lot of playtesting, it is really helpful when kind of preparing for the RCQ season or for RCs, just trying to figure out what decks I want to play or testing out very specific matches. And of course, it really helps out being a content creator as well, because I can go and try out these different decks and kind of make my own assumptions and explorations in real time as y'all get to watch, and we're not stuck trying to figure out how we're going to be able to afford next week's deck. So definitely check out Manatraders. They're a really sweet resource and tool if you want to get into playing competitive Magic online. If you use my code in the description down below, you will get 5% off your monthly subscription. On top of that too, you just get some really cool rewards the longer you are subscribed to them. Like, you end up getting a cheaper cost overall per month on top of an increase to your rental limit, and they have various different tiers that you can subscribe to for various different reasons, whether you want to play more expensive formats or you want to play something like Pauper or whatever. There is a tier for everybody, so go ahead and check them out. Use my code in the description down below. You'll end up supporting the channel, and you'll get a few bucks off of your subscription. So definitely check them out. Thank you for Manatraders being a sponsor of the channel. Now let's go ahead and talk about Standard here. So VV Orienteer, Screaming Nemesis, Prosthetic Memory. They, of course, in these articles usually end up giving the reasons for why cards end up getting banned here. Of course, the thing that we're more worried about and focusing on is just kind of some of the admissions made in a lot of these paragraphs and everything like that. So one of the things, missing on power level of a new card to some extent is inevitable, but there are ways that we can improve our accuracy. VV Orniteer is an example of a card where the ramifications of the individual power level mistake were amplified tremendously by our failure to find interactions with Agatha's Soul's Cauldron. Increasingly, the standard metagame has been defined by a ceiling of strong multi-card synergies rather than power level of an individual card. Adjusting this to design shift is in progress, and we still have room to grow. So this is part of my complaint with the current way the standard is set up. Of course, we have 6 sets coming out every year, with 2026 having 7 sets. We have something like Foundations, which I do like in theory, but that's a set that's going to have, ramifications in standard for the next 5 years, which I think are overall good, but there are some growing pains that come with that as well. And of course, with, there being roughly 15 to 18 sets, we'll say, in standard before we really get rotation. Standard is just getting bigger and bigger. And a lot of the ways that we try to mitigate the damage that happens in bigger formats like Modern, where we do see something on Modern Horizons, and of course all the sets that get printed in Standard, some amount of those cards do end up in the Modern format in some capacity, whether they are format all-stars or they're just really powerful role players. The way to kind of mitigate those kind of strategies and newer cards breaking kind of the older cards or vice versa is that we do have bans and unbans to kind of adjust for the power level of the format, where maybe if a card's too good, we end up banning it, and then of course if a card isn't too good for the format, it's kind of at the appropriate power level or maybe below the power level, you unban it. The problem with Standard is the fact that there is a rotation. It's not like Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you just, as soon as there's a new set, essentially Legacy being, or Vintage, I guess, be more akin to it, is the thing, and then there's a ban and restricted announcement for the entire format, and whatever cards get banned, they essentially affects the main competitive format. Standard doesn't have that. We have up to 3 years, and of course some other sets that are involved with that. And the idea was to, create more diversity in the metagame instead of having to, have a deck that really doesn't come together until the last set, and you have 3 to 6 months left of, the other sets that kind of support the bulk of that strategy. You have it extended to where it's going to last another year on top of that, 3 to 6 months that it is going to exist in the format. And while I think in theory that's a really good idea, and of course making rotation last another year essentially, so you get more cards into the card pool, you're not trying to cram all these synergies into, before it was 6 to 8 sets before a deck rotates, and then it kind of feels bad. We've kind of created this problem where, at least outlined kind of in this paragraph and in this whole section, is that there's just sometimes you're not able to playtest every single powerful synergy that exists, or you're not going to be able to identify any powerful synergies. And while I think inherently that's not necessarily a bad thing, I mean, you don't want the playtest team knowing exactly okay, this is the absolute best version of this card, and this is what the best version of this deck looks like in playtesting. I mean, maybe that would be ideal, but you definitely want the players to kind of figure that out. You want to find a lot of the good service level synergies, but there's this idea that hey, there's these cards that kind of synergize well together in their sets, and then you kind of go out farther and farther, and it's whoa, wow, this card that was already individually very powerful gets even more powerful, and we printed these cards not knowing that they were going to synergize with these cards. And again, when you have a standard format that, at least from where I'm, the standard formats I'm used to playing, where it's at least 2 to even 3 times the size that it normally is, maybe 3 times is a little bit of exaggerative, but 2 to 2.5 times the size of a normal standard, it ends up being awful. And I think when you have these big formats, where you have 18, 20 sets that you're trying to work with, plus some other things, you're inevitably going to have bans that end up happening here. Similarly, what we see with Prophesydetic Memory is a strong engine card where the ever-increasing density of strong interactions available in the format got away from us. We designed and tested Prophesydetic Memory in Murders of Karlov Manor Standard, which it feels like it was forever ago. See if I can see the year on the card. 2024. I think that was probably at the beginning of 2024 was the Pro Tour Murders of Karlov Manor, with, of course, the the Pioneer Pro Tour. So that's just so long ago. That's almost 2 years ago at this point. And so we have a format where most of the powerful synergies didn't exist. Continuing on the paragraph, we noticed the lack of options and made Steam Core Scholar in the same set would be a great card alongside Prof's Eidetic Memory, which players did play Steam Core Scholar and Prof's Eidetic Memory side by side in some of those like Prof's like blue-black mid-range decks. Because there weren't a lot of strong synergies with Prof's Eidetic Memory, we felt comfortable printing it at a high individual rate, and we thought the overall deck was medium strength but really fun. Particularly enjoyed that despite synergizing with card draw, it asked players to tap out on their turn to get full value. Our predictions on it might go up here and there, but it was unlikely to become one of the strongest decks in the metagame. And we were right for that environment. It took 7 months till the release of Duskmourn and Fear of Missing Out, Prof's Eidetic Memory package, which cemented itself as a key player in Standard. As new cards were released and the overall package became stronger, the experience of playing against the deck became less fun. For example, the addition of Fear of Missing Out, it gave it access to bursts of combo damage in the versions that we didn't test. This addition of the combo finish made the deck stronger and more punishing to play against. Once we recognized that Prof's Eidetic Memory had the capacity to be exceedingly powerful alongside creatures that draw cards and cheap spells that draw multiple cards, that we should have considered how likely we were to make more of these cards in the future. In that case, the answer was extremely. In the future, this is a question that we'll be asking for shipping similar card engines at a higher rate. Cards at high rates. So this is like again something that you print a card and then it kind of narrows down the design space of certain things, because I would imagine Profs wouldn't be that bad if it was going to rotate in 2 or 3. I mean, right now obviously it's a problem and VV is a problem, but rather these cards are probably a little bit more, a little less egregious. Maybe we just see more of the traditional like blue-red decks instead of the like VV Cauldron stuff. If Agatha's Soul's Cauldron is rotated out of the format, if Prof's Eidetic Memory is rotated out of the format. So there's a lot of these things that kind of happen with having a bigger standard set. So overall, to kind of get to like wrap up that point, is that I think we need to go back to a smaller standard, where whether it's a 2-year rotation or like a year and a half like it used to be, or it's just somewhere in between 2 or 3 years, or just having less sets in general. I think that a 2-year worked when you had 8 sets, and I think a 2-year could work when you're jamming 12, 13 sets. You still get a big standard, while also within reason having that window where you could like test cards that are going to come out in year 2 that are going to synergize with some of the cards that are rotating out, but you don't necessarily have to what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have to kind of like neuter yourself and like, okay, well, this card's going to be in Standard for the next year and a half, and it's not going to be fun. And of course, we don't want to ban cards in Standard, so we have to like down the power level of this card, and maybe turning down the power level of some cards and having like a kind of reset wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. I'm fine with forging the path forward and just having these powerful synergies, or like extremely powerful synergies, only exist in Standard for a very short time, and we just move on through rotation. Which kind of brings me to like my next point here, is that if you kind of like lower the threshold for rotation, whether it's down to 2 years, whatever the case may be, I think you have to take some amount of Universes Beyond out of Standard, or just take it out completely. I love Universes Beyond. I understand its impact on Magic and how important it is, and even in this day and age, with any sort of IP being able to cross over with really anything that remotely synergizes well, or has the perceived synergization of your, I don't even know if synergization is a word, I might have just made that up, but kind of having that feeling of like, this belongs here and this is really fun. I think when you have Universes Beyond in Standard and you charge these prices where they're like $7, $8 a pack, $10 a pack, $15, whatever the case may be, I think it starts to price people out of Standard. And I think that's kind of the thing that gets lost in all this, is that Standard is supposed to be an affordable format that you can play. It's the main competitive format of Magic. When Standard is really good, I think competitive Magic is awesome. And we saw that at the beginning of 2025 with the Atlanta Spotlight series, where there was a ton of people just playing a brand new Standard format. The first time that we were getting essentially a Grand Prix style event that could qualify you for the Pro Tour back in the kind of this competitive rotation, and players showed out for it. And it shows that when you have a really good Standard format, players like to show up. Doesn't necessarily mean that Universes Beyond can't exist in Standard, or to have an enjoyable Standard format, you can't have Universes Beyond. But I think that a lot of the things stopping a lot of players from getting into Standard is how expensive decks are. I mean, can you imagine like investing into VV Cauldron, thinking like, this is a very powerful deck, they're going to try to ban less cards in Standard, only for them to have essentially hit the deck twice now, And then, you're out, the hundreds of dollars to play that deck. Now, that's the risk that you end up taking, but in either case, like, it still feels bad. And you can see the comment section in my videos from years past where, like, it's still just a feel bad, even if you know that something is going to get banned, that you still invested in a deck that you thought was going to still be played or ended up being really good. And just because the deck is, like, really good, or maybe even just way better than everything else going on, that it just shouldn't exist anymore, and it gets banned, and it does create kind of that feel bad. So I think that there's two roads that we have to go down to say this. We continue kind of the road we're down, and we just accept that bans are inevitably going to happen at a much higher rate than they ever have in Standard, with Standard getting bigger and bigger and being the biggest that it's ever been and probably will ever be, because I can't imagine we would just keep extending that window to include more and more sets unless we just crammed more sets into the window that we already have. So I doubt that we'll end up getting a bigger window. So I think there's just the chance that Standard is going to be as expensive as it is going to be with Universes Beyond, and then we're going to kind of continue to see that as more Universes Beyond get printed into Standard, and as Standard gets bigger, we're just going to have to get used to more bannings. Like, that is just inevitably what's going to happen. Or we can try to course correct if we want less bans in Standard, and maybe even making Standard more affordable, which I am totally on board with, to make it easier for people to have that lower barrier entry to be able to play like a cheap tier 1 deck. We always hear Pokemon all the time. Pokemon has like a tier 1 deck that's under $100. That's like the best deck in the format, or like the best deck in the format's like $150. And like, when you can build multiple tier 1 Pokemon decks for the cost of one tier 1 standard deck, and that deck is more than likely going to get banned, that's not a good thing. I think that's kind of a reason to, pull it back on the Universes Beyond stuff, or at least make it at a reasonable price to where players aren't priced out of playing these cards in Standard, especially if you're going to print cards that are going to be absolutely fantastic, that are going to be Standard staples like we saw with VV or Natir. So I think that's kind of where we're at here. I would like to see, a shorter rotation window where we have like maybe 12, 13 sets in Standard, then we have a rotation, and we just kind of build up, and then let it all rotate out again. Ideally, this would create less bannable cards, because most of the cards that have the powerful synergies by the time we get to the end are going to be rotating out of the format anyway. So at least, like, if we have a bad format, then we don't have it for nearly as long, and hopefully it's not as bad as kind of what we saw with these Is It decks versus like Mono Red, and it just being kind of that for the last few months, really since the Pro Tour Final Fantasy. So, again, this is a long, rambly video. It's kind of what I like doing. So be sure, again, to leave your comments down below what you think needs to be done with Standard. Do we just need to leave it alone? Is it going to fix itself? Is there anything in particular that you like or don't like about either case? Whatever those opinions are, be sure to leave those in the comments down below. Of course, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell so you're notified of future videos. But that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope to see you all in the next one.